right, so now since we're done with this project, let's move on to, let's move back to that Rubik's Cube and let's actually texture it and let's add materials on it, and then we will light it and we'll render it out, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting everything basically, and I'm just going to be hiding them. And this is basically to hide them in the viewport. But if I actually go ahead and render this, you're going to see that if I render image, it is still going to be visible, right? Although it's hidden. And the reason for that is because we don't have this turned on. This is basically the render view. So if I turn this off as well, you're going to see now if I render this, it's going to render as completely black. So basically, if you are hiding something in your viewport, make sure to hide it in the render as well. Otherwise, it's going to, it's going to show up in the render. And oftentimes it has caused me a lot of confusion and a lot of troubleshooting just because I just forgot about it. Anyway, so I'm just going to be turning on the Rubik's Cube back again. And I'm going to press Alt Z on my keyboard. I think my shortcuts is turned off. So I'm just going to turn that on. Let me close this out, so you can see which buttons I'm pressing right here. Anyway, so now what we're going to be doing is that we are actually, first let me just go ahead and turn the camera back on so that we can place the camera properly. And let's turn on our viewport guides in this. And let's click this button right here so that we can move our camera again. View, lock camera to view. And I'm going to press Alt middle mouse button to lock it to this. I think we should place our camera somewhere there. I think that should be a good starting point for our camera. We can move it later on. And I'm just going to unlock it real quick. Perfect. So now what we're going to be doing is that we are going to be rendering this. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go inside my rendered viewport mode. Right now it's not really showing anything because we don't have any lights. Now we basically have two options. Either we could just go ahead and add lights like these, like the ones which we added previously, or we can use another lighting technique, which is called adding HDRIs. Now what HDRIs are, if I just go to the internet and if I search it, HDRI, not HDRI Haven, this is basically the website which we used to download HDRIs. However, basically what HDRIs are is that they're essentially 3D images of real world places which you can use to sort of cast lights on your scene, right? So we're just going to go to the internet and then we're going to go and search for HDRI Haven. Then just go to this website, which is called polyhaven.com. And it was previously called HDRI Haven, but now it's Polyhaven. So once you're in this website, you can just go ahead and select any HDRI that you want. Now I'm going to use an indoor HDRI. You typically want to use something which is appropriate to your scene. If you're shooting an outdoor scene, then use an outdoor HDRI. If you want a studio look, then you can go ahead and choose a studio HDRI. But this time I'm going to be using an indoor sort of HDRI. So I'm just going to look for something good. I think something like that should be good. This brown photo studio. I think that is a pretty neutral look. So I'm just going to be going ahead and downloading this. So minimum, I would recommend you to download 4K quality. However, if you can go 8K or 16K, that is definitely recommended. And HDR format works perfectly fine. So just go ahead and download this. And it is going to take a minute to download. So I'll see when it's done. All right, so while this is downloading, let's go ahead and create a table for our Rubik's Cube, because obviously we're going to need a table, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be, let's turn off rendered view, by the way, just so that we can save performance and we can get a better frame rate. Right, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be creating a plane, add mesh and plane, because our plane is just going to be a table. And I'm just going to be placing it something like that, somewhere there. Just make sure that it is not intersecting the table. Even if it is a little above, that doesn't really make that much of a difference. Just move it something like that. I think that should be good. Let's increase the size. And now if you want to extend the table down, I'm just going to be showing you how to model a very basic table. You can just press tab to go into edit mode, right? Go to face select mode, select the bottom face, right? And so if I just press E and extrude it down, something like that. So that's going to be our table bottom part. And then I'm just going to press I to inset it, something like that. Inset it, something like that. And let's go and extrude it out even more. And let's actually scale it down, something like that. And then we can extrude it down even more. And then what we can do is that we can press E to extrude it and then extrude it something like that. I think that should be our base. And so now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting all these bases. So this face, this side, and this side. Also, if you want to select a whole loop, like if you want to select like faces all around, what you can do is you can simply double click it. And it's right now what the problem which we did was that we actually selected this loop, right? This loop which was going around there. So if I click around this edge, you're going to see that it's going to select that loop. So that's perfectly fine. And now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press E and then S to extrude and then scale up. However, I'm going to also press Shift Z so that we only extrude and scale it up in the X and Y axes. So something like that should be a good base for us. Now what I'm going to do is that I actually want to sort of smooth it out. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be using the subdivision surface modifier, and I actually want to introduce that as well in this using this tutorial. So we can just go to the modifiers tab, add modifier, and let's add a subdivision surface modifier. Right now you're going to see that it's way too smooth, which I actually kind of like, but I'm going to show you how to make it a little more sort of sharp around the edges if you want. So we can increase the levels viewport to something like 3 and render to 3 as well. You generally want to keep the levels viewport lower if your computer is slower, so that you can basically save performance while you're editing, and then once you're done with it, you can just render the high resolution version of it. And I'm going to right click, shade smooth, and I'm going to turn on auto smooth as well. And I think if you just press shade auto smooth, I think it should do all this for you. I think let's turn it on and let's see what it does. Yeah, it just turns it on. So I would recommend you to just do shade auto smooth because that's more efficient. Now let's say you want to sort of make this a little more sharp, right, around the edges. The way you can do that is by adding loop cuts, right? So what loop cuts do is basically, if I will want to make it a square again, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to press Ctrl R and I'm going to be adding a loop cut right here. So now if I add a loop cut and if I bring it closer to the edges, you're going to see that our the shape of our table is going to change and it's going to become more sharp around the edges. So that's how you essentially modify the, the subdivision surface modifier, by adding loop cuts around the edges. The closer you take them to the edges, the sharper it's going to become. So I think something like that is good. We can maybe add a loop cut down there as well. Control R, bring it up, something like that, and that should look good. I think the bottom part is fine. Yeah, so I think we're looking pretty good with the table. So one thing which I am going to do is that I'm going to be adding a loop cut along this edge as well, because I want the top of the table to be sharp. And actually, let's make the bottom sharp as well, something like that. So let's add a loop cut and bring it to the bottom. Right, so I think now our table is looking pretty decent. It is obviously not that great, if I'm being honest. Like, it's not something which I would usually use in any of my scenes. However, for beginners, I think it's really nice. You can add other loop cuts around these edges as well if you want to make it square. So there's that. Perfect. Another way to do this would be to use the bevel modifier, because that's going to automatically bevel around the edges and it's going to make your subdivision surface modifier less smooth without having to sort of add all these loop cuts. Let's see if our HDRI is downloaded. It is. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be using this HDRI. I'm just going to be dragging this onto my desktop just so that I can sort of, just so that it's easier for me to apply it. Otherwise, you would obviously want to create a whole HDRI library, and I do have an HDRI library. But right now, just for simplicity's sake, I wanted to drag it to the desktop. So what I'm going to do to add the HDRI is, let me first go ahead and, actually, I don't think we need 2 viewports for this. Let's just close this one viewport. So the way we do that is by right clicking right here, click join areas, and then whichever one you want to dissolve, you can just click that one. So if I want to dissolve that, it's just going to go away. And so let's go into the rendered viewport mode. Right now there are no lights. Be sure to save your project. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to this world properties, and instead of the color, we actually could change the color. If you remember, we did that previously. Instead of doing that, we're going to press this yellow dot right here, and then we're going to go inside this environment texture. If we do that, you're going to see that everything is going to become purple, and we're going to have these options. So if I just click open, now we can just go ahead and browse over to where we saved that HDRI, and I'm not exactly sure what it was called. Brown Photo Studio. Okay. Brown Photo Studio. Open image, and now you're going to see magically we have the whole HDRI applied as the background, which is absolutely perfect, right? I think our scene looks pretty good. I think our scene's lighting is especially good. So, but right now we don't really have any textures or anything like that, so we're going to have to go ahead and add those. So I'm just going to go inside my camera, and right now you're going to see that even though our camera is right here, everything outside of our camera is also rendering. If you don't want to do that, and if you want to render everything which is inside your camera, by the way, the reason why you would want to do this is because so that you can save some performance and you can actually look at how your camera is going to look, right? So what you can do is you can press Ctrl B on your keyboard, and then you can just highlight this area of your camera, and then it's going to automatically snap to the camera only, right? And so I'm just going to press Ctrl S. And so now we can just go ahead and start to add the textures, right? Our lighting is essentially just done. It was just as simple as that. And so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be selecting the cube first, and let's go ahead and add a material to this. Let's go to the material tab, add a new material. The base color, I'm going to be setting it to black. I think something like that should be good. Don't go perfectly black or perfectly white in anything, because in real life, nothing is really perfectly black or perfectly white. Everything is a shade of gray. So I'm going to be reducing the roughness to make it a little shinier. Let's zoom in to see it better. You can also turn on denoising, by the way. So just go to the render settings and turn on denoise. If you have an NVIDIA RTX graphic card, turn on optics. Otherwise, just set it to automatic and it's going to just denoise your image for you and it's going to look a lot better. So right now, I think we probably should see this, make sure that it is shaded smooth. Let's just do that. And so I'm going to be reducing the roughness a little more. Something like that. I think that is better, maybe a little more. Yeah, I think something like that should be good. And now if you want an all white Rubik's Cube, you have that ready. But if you don't, you can go ahead and add new, materials on this. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be making a solved Rubik's Cube. So the way we do that is by simply adding a new material. And I'm just going to be changing the base color to something like green first. Because when I was learning the Rubik's Cube, I actually solved the green side first always. And the reason for that was because the YouTube video that I watched to learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube was, in that video, the guy solved the green side first. So I just have a habit. I think I'm not entirely sure which colors are in the Rubik's Cube and on which sides. So I'm just gonna search for Rubik's Cube. Right, so yeah, this picture is going to be very helpful for us. So above green is yellow. So I'm just going to make a yellow color. Something like that should be good. You can just choose whichever shade of yellow you want. And then on the left side, you have orange. Select it, orange, something like that. And that is looking good. Yeah, perfect. Now you can go ahead and apply materials to other sides as well. So I think this side, yeah, this side would be blue. And the other side, I think, should be white. Make it blue. And then I think this. Okay, so the one at the bottom should be white. And the one next to blue should be red. So I'm just going to make this red. Right, I think it looks pretty good. And then the bottom is already white. We don't really need to do anything to that. But right now, you're going to see that our Rubik's Cube is looking good. However, our table is not. Table is definitely not looking that good. So what I'm going to do to fix that is that I'm going to be applying a texture to this. Now, the texture which we're going to be applying is just going to be a simple texture which we're going to take from the internet. So I'm just going to go to the internet and I'm going to search for wood texture seamless. And the reason why we're writing seamless is so that the texture which we get is not, it does not look tiled when we tile it, if that makes sense. So I think something like this should be a good texture. Let's get a free one. I think this is free, hopefully. Let's see if it is free or not. Free pick textures are generally free. However, some of them are paid as well. I think that looks good. Yeah, so we can download it for free. However, attribution is required. So all credits go to rawpixel.com. And it is downloading. So I'm just going to give it a second and I will see when it's done. All right, so the texture has completed downloading. And so what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to go to the shading tab. So we were in the layout tab previously. So I'm just going to go to shading tab. And now we can just select the table. I'm just going to turn on the viewport guides. So now I'm just going to select this table and then we can create a new material. You can also click new right there as well in the material tab, or you can just click it right here. And so basically what we can do is that we can simply just go ahead and drag in that texture. So I'm just going to be dragging this in like that. And then I'm just going to be plugging this into the base color. Now, you must be wondering what exactly this option is for. This was for rendering, right? And this was for your viewport. This is for looking at the materials as they are, right? So now if I just click this, you're going to see that the lighting is going to be different. The lighting is not going to be that realistic. However, we are going to see our texture. And I think it looks pretty good, doesn't it? The texture is pretty good. And however, if I just go to the bottom, you're going to see that it is absolutely messed up, right? The texture at the bottom is absolutely messed up. And that's because we don't have it UV unwrapped, right? So I'm not going to go into too much detail about UV unwrapping in this course. However, I'm just going to show you a very, very simple and very basic way to do UV unwrapping on pretty much any object. It works on most objects unless you want to sort of custom UV unwrap it. That's a very advanced thing. I think you shouldn't be worried about that right now. But what you can do is you can simply press tab to go into edit mode. Once you're in edit mode, you can just press A to select everything. And then you can just press U to go into the UV mapping mode. And once you're here, you can just click Smart UV Project. Now this is just going to do it automatically for you. Press OK and everything is going to be automatically UV unwrapped, right? Now you're going to see that the texture is looking a lot better. Around the edges, it's not that good. However, that is because we have the subdivision surface modifier. If I just go ahead and turn that off, you're going to see that everything is going to become perfectly fine. So that's just a cost which you have to sort of bear if you're using the subdivision surface modifier. And we're going to place our camera in such a way that that side is not visible, right? So I'm just going to go back to my layout mode. Let's actually go to our camera. Let's go to the rendered view and let's see how it looks. I think it looks pretty decent. However, the wood doesn't really look that realistic. The reason for that is because the size of the wood texture is too high, too large. So I'm just going to be reducing the size of that. How exactly do we do that? We simply go to the UV editing tab. Once we get there, make sure that your table is selected, by the way. You're going to see that that texture is going to be visible, which we applied. It's going to be visible automatically. And we're going to have this table selected. However, it's going to be in edit mode automatically. So if I press A to select everything, you're going to see that all your UVs which are unwrapped are going to be visible here. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail about what exactly UVs are or how you can sort of modify them. However, what you can do is we can just press A to select everything, right? Then press S to scale it up, something like that. And basically the larger your UVs are relative to your texture, the smaller your texture is going to appear on your object. So if I just go to my material tab, material preview tab, you're going to see that I want you guys to focus on this wood right here. So if I scale it down, you're going to see that the wood texture is going to become larger. But if I scale it up, you're going to see that it's going to become smaller and smaller and smaller. So that's exactly what you want. And so let's go back to our layout mode. Right now, you're going to see that it is looking a lot better, right? The scale is perfectly fine. And I'm just going to be rotating this that way. Or maybe what we can do is we can change the position of our camera. So I'm just going to select my camera. Let's go here, view, lock camera to view. I think we should maybe place it somewhere there. I think that you can just try to sort of play around with this and see what looks the most realistic. With HDRIs, you're gonna face a lot of what do you call it? A lot of uncertainty. It's gonna look completely different from one side and completely different from the other. So you just have to go ahead and sort of eyeball it and just see what looks good. And now we can go ahead and rotate our camera, rotate our table as well, something like that. And I think it looks pretty good, looks pretty decent. Now, one thing which we are missing is depth of field. We want depth of field, which basically means that you want the background of this scene to be blurred, right? Because the background is perfectly in focus, which makes it look very fake. So the way we add depth of field is by simply going to the camera. With this, in these camera settings, we can just simply go ahead and turn on depth of field. And now we're going to have to select a focus object, basically. And that focus object in our case is going to be this Rubik's Cube exactly. And so right now you're going to see that the background is going to become slightly blurred. However, if you want to make it more blur, you can turn down this f-stop. If you bring it to pretty much 0.1, then it's going to become very, very shallow. The depth of field is going to become very shallow. However, if I set it to something more realistic, something like 1.8, now you're going to see that it looks really nice. Let's turn off our viewport guides so that we can just let it render and let's see how it looks in actual. So I think it looks pretty decent. One thing which I do want to do is that I want to increase the amount of beveling that we're doing. So I'm just going to select my cube. And this is the benefit of using modifiers, by the way. You could just simply go ahead and modify the amount of beveling or anything which you do with modifiers. And it's very, very convenient. I think 0.15. I think that is a lot better. Yeah, that's better. So now we can just go ahead, and also one thing which I'm going to do is that I can reduce the roughness of this. And then we can reduce the roughness of this as well. Also, if this doesn't look realistic enough for you, what you can do is you can add a normal map to these, to these colors, right? So how exactly do we do that? It's very simple, actually. We just go to the internet and then we're going to be searching for plastic normal map. And so if we do that, you're going to see that we're going to find something which is pretty blue and it basically has a lot of bumps on it. If I just open this image in a new tab and if I zoom in, you're going to see that this has very minor bumps on it, right? So we want this look to be on our colors, right? So I'm just going to be saving this image and let's apply this to our scene. Save image. I don't know why it's not saving it. But anyways, let's try from here, normal, and it's going to save it. Never mind. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to select one of these colors. We're going to be applying it to all of them individually, but for now, just one of them. And so in this, we have this normal tab, a normal input, which we can just plug this normal output to. It's actually pretty simple. We don't really need to do anything. So we just plug this in, and then I'm just going to press Shift A, and then I'm going to search for normal map. And then we're just going to be dropping this in middle of this. Let's make this non-color as well. And now if I just go very close to this, you're going to see that it has very minor bumps. And if you want to sort of make these larger, that is pretty simple as well. If you look at it from this angle, I think it's a lot more visible. You're going to see that it has these bumps, which makes it look very realistic. Let's see how it looks in the actual render. Zoom in. Let's see if we need to scale it up or not. But I'm going to show you how to scale it up either way. I think we do need to scale it up, yeah. The way we do that is pretty simple. We just select our object. You go into the UV editing tab, and then we can just select this, or press A to select everything. And then I'm just going to be going close to my object just so that I can see it properly. If I scale it up, you're going to see that the texture is going to scale down. However, if I scale it down, it's going to become pretty large. And we can also go ahead and increase the roughness slightly, because I think this is a lot more realistic. And then we can just go ahead and adjust the size. I think something like that should be good. Let's see how it looks in our final rendered view. Let's wait for it to render. Right now it is looking very fake because it is not rendered completely. Let's render it a little bit and then we'll see how it is looking. All right, so I think this looks really nice now. I think the normal map is really adding a lot. So now let's go ahead and do the same exact thing on other materials as well. So I'm just going to go back to my shading tab, and here I can just go to the material preview mode because I think that is enough. Now I can just select this texture, and then I can just copy this whole thing. Just select both of them and press Ctrl C. Let's go to this material and let's apply it right here. And let's go to this. Let's apply it right here as well. You can do it with others as well, but I'm just not going to do with the other ones because they're not visible in our scene. So I think, yeah. Now what we can do is we can just select this object, go into the UV editing tab, and then we're going to have to eyeball this. So just scale it down just so that it is similar in scale to the other one. Perfect. Now let's go back to our layout mode. Let's select this one. Let's go back to our UV editing mode. Select everything, scale it down. And I think something like that should be good. Roughness, I'm going to increase it as well. Let's go back to the layout mode and let's select this. Make sure that the roughness is high in this as well, something like that. And yeah, I think our scene is looking pretty decent. One thing which I am going to do is that I'm going to be setting my depth of field f-stop to 1.2 instead of 1.8 because I think this more depth of field looks a lot more realistic in this specific scene. So yeah, let's go ahead and render this out and then we'll see how it looks. So I'm just going to go to my render properties. Let's make sure that our max samples are 1000, and you can also set this to very high contrast if you want, but I think none is very flat. Obviously high contrast is I think the sweet spot, or medium high contrast. But yeah, I think we're good. We're looking good with this. So I can just go ahead and render image, and be sure to save everything before rendering it because Blender can crash while rendering. I am speaking from experience, by the way. So yeah. Also make sure that your denoise is turned on in your render. It is turned on by default, but make sure that it is turned on if it isn't, just in case. Yeah, I think, all right, so now the rendering is complete. Now we can just go to image, save as, and then you can just send it to your iPhone or do whatever you want. And I usually like to edit my renders on my iPhone because I think the iPhone editing app is really good, the default one. So I can just go ahead and name it Rubik's Cube, of course. Perfect. So that's our render. If you were following this tutorial and if you followed it successfully, then congratulations. I'm really proud of you. And if you were not able to do that, it's perfectly fine. You will get the hang of Blender eventually. Don't worry about anything. Be sure to continue to make these projects and just don't give up. You will eventually get there. All right. Thanks so for watching this project, and I will see you in the next one.